Good morning, Basis Northeast families. Thank you for joining us this morning for our coffee chat. My name is Jen Neal. I'm a regional director with BASIS.ed, and I'm going to be moderating behind the scenes today. That's why you see Chris Ferguson in the shot and not me. But you can enter any questions you have on the chat, but I also have a list of the questions that were submitted beforehand, so we will talk about those today, as many as we can get to. But for now, I will pass it over to Chris Ferguson for our introduction, and Ursula Williams, head of operations, is on site, and so we will patch over to her live when we have questions about safety or about the building. So stand by, Ursula. Chris.
Thank you all for joining us today. I'm glad that you were able to join us, and we want to make sure that we are answering any and all questions that you have as we look towards the coming school year. We know that this coming school year is going to be unlike anything that the schools across the country have seen in the past, and we want you to know that we are ready. We are ready for any of it, whatever that may look like. A lot of time working on making sure that our staff, making sure that our building is going to be prepared for students, and also making sure that our teachers are fully prepared in the eventuality that we do have strictly online classes, or in the definite eventuality that some of our students will be on campus. Some of our students will be distance learning. It is something where right now I know that all of us are looking for answers in an uncertain time, and I'm going to do my best to provide those to you with what we have. That means is that we have high academic standards. We also have high standards of excellence to make sure that we are supporting your students in every way that we possibly can. And that is whether they are in person or whether they are distance learning. And we are fully prepared to make sure that we are providing that support for you and your students. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jen right now and make sure that we're going to dive into the questions. And I think our first one is actually going to go to Ursula.
First, if you could just tell us what's going on at campus right now, some of the exciting updates going on in the building, and what you're doing to prepare to make sure students and faculty are safe. Should we start in person?
Absolutely. So I couldn't hear all of that question, but I heard the majority of it, so I'll do my best to answer. I am currently in the building right now, hence the jacket, the vest, the safety vest. Right now, construction is wrapping up. Most of the construction workers are out of the building. Now we're just finishing up with some electrical work and finishing up with the playground. And hold on just one second.
Are you having some technical difficulties, Ursula?
No, just making sure we're not having technical difficulties. Should I continue?
Yeah, I can see you and I can hear you.
Perfect. On that thought of the finishing touches for the building, as of yesterday, we're putting in the playground equipment, which I was in my office for the majority of the day, and I happened to do a walkthrough and discover that some of the playground equipment has started being installed, which was very, very exciting. So right now, as I mentioned, we're finishing up with electrical work and putting some finishing touches in, putting the phones in, and getting everything live and ready to go. There are a lot of things that my operations team are preparing for to get ready to have students in the building. We're doing a lot of safety measures, such as receiving some really great boxes of PPE that the state of Texas has donated to us, and our corporate office has as well sent down to us. So I'm getting that allocated to make sure that we have enough quantities to support all of our children, our faculty, and our staff. So that PPE would include masks, some gloves, some face shields, and anything else that we can secure to make sure that we are as safe as possible when students enter the building. Also, we have hand sanitizer stations. I'm making sure, as a matter of fact, I was just on with a vendor this morning just to make sure that we have contactless soap dispensers, paper towel dispensers, and anything else that we need in order to make sure that we minimize as much touching as possible for, just to make sure that we have limited transference of any kind of germs or anything else for that matter. So we're doing quite a lot with the operations team just to make sure that everyone is safe and comfortable and socially distanced as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ursula. We'll give you a break for a moment, and we will start asking the questions that we received in advance. And apologies if you can't see the comment box currently of this session. We will schedule another one of these next week if your question isn't asked today. So Chris, let's start with students who choose online learning. Are they even assigned to an actual class with an actual teacher? Will there be any times for kids to meet each other online and interact with each other and the teacher?
Yeah, I'm really glad that that question is the one that we're able to address today. Yes, the first part of that answer is that our students, if they are distance learning, they will be assigned to one of our on-site elements. We call our student groupings elements. So they are assigned to one of those on-site elements, and they are a part of that class. They have those same SETs, those subject expert teachers, as the students who are going to be receiving in-person instruction. They also have in grades 1 through 3 the same LET, that same learning expert teacher. And in kindergarten, they have that same kindergarten expert teacher and kindergarten teaching fellow as the teachers who are providing the material and the support for the students during their online instruction. And so for those students who are going to be doing online instruction, that is going to include opportunities for live interaction with the teachers, whether it's the LET or the SET, as well as regularly scheduled weekly meetings with that LET and with that kindergarten teacher to be able to make sure that we're checking in at least once a week individually with each and every one of our students and families to make sure that they are getting that support and make sure that they're getting that social connection and emotional connection with our families as well. It's really important for us that they are all part of our Northeast family, all of our students, whether they're in person or online. And so even for things like our award ceremonies, which we will be doing by elements this year, those students who are learning virtually will be part of the award ceremony, and we will have the technical ability to be able to loop them in to reward them for their hard work with everything on that as well. And so I know we're going to get into some more on what that online program looks like, but our students are absolutely part of our Northeast staff and of our Northeast family, with Northeast staff as the ones who are supporting them and giving them feedback on their work and giving them the support when they need it.
Great. Are there any other alternatives for the students who are not able to attend BASIS? Following local guidelines, and we're closely following that the mayor announced yesterday to determine what is safe in terms of in-person learning for schools.
Yeah, so currently we are planning for in-person BOSS Camp, and BOSS Camp, as most of you know, is an opportunity for students to be able to come in and get some exposure to BASIS and what we do and some of the policies and procedures, and really get to know the teachers and some fellow students. For that camp itself, we have it very specifically set up with very small class sizes. Social distancing is a requirement during that. All of our students who are attending BOSS Camp are also required to wear face masks during any able to distance, so coming into the building, for example, and you're not able to social distance during that time when they get board the school, they're not able to stay 6 feet apart. So masks are in that. Hand washing is actually a part of the routine that Ms. Cavan has put together for that to make sure the BOSS Camp is as safe as it possibly can be, and we have followed every single one of the guidelines and mandates that TEA has put out for summer school programs to make sure that that is as safe as possible for both our students and our staff. As far as in a virtual option for those families who are not able to attend in person, we are, for all students, as a non-fee-based program, we are doing what I am calling eBOS. We are putting together a virtual introduction to our campus and some of our platforms to make sure you're accessing that. How do I make sure that I'm setting up my home space to make sure that both students and parents, how do we set up our folders to make sure that we are able to do that? That will also be covered, obviously, during the first week and weeks of school with those policies and procedures and routines and things like that for both distance learning and in-person learning. But it's a good exposure to get ahead of time. So we are setting that up for the week of August. We're not sure exactly. There will be an opportunity to engage with that live, as well as that will be distributed to everybody if you want to view it asynchronously afterwards, to get some exposure and to really meet some of our faculty and meet some of the routines. In addition to that, we are committed to that all of our families will get to know who our staff and faculty is. What does that look? Movement into the building is going to be necessarily limited this coming school year for outside guests, but we want to make sure that you all feel comfortable with that. And teachers will also put together introduction prior to school starting so that your student is familiar with who their teachers are going to be for the upcoming school year.
Great. There's another question, the online learning schedule, not for BOSS, but for the normal school year. Do you have an idea what that would look like? So we can see if it will work with parents' job schedules before we choose online or in-person learning, of course, should there be a choice?
Yeah, so, and I think, that is one point, is that we are planning for the eventuality that it is entirely possible, whether it's at the beginning of the year or at some point throughout the school year, that there may be the need, based on local health conditions, that we are told that all of our students will be 100% online. But even if that's not the case, we know that a lot of our students will be throughout the year. One of the things that we got feedback on from our families from last school year, and also one of the things that we looked at as we were looking at our plans over the summer, was what makes the best educational sense for students. And one of the things that really popped out with that is the fact that students having a regular schedule as a recommended part of their school day helps them accomplish their work in a better manner. It also provides for more opportunity for live interaction with their teacher. So a lot of our online classes will involve pre-recorded videos and materials that teach the lesson, but oftentimes and sometimes our teachers will be able to be available live during those sessions as well to answer questions as they're coming in during that instruction. But don't mistake that means that they're in front of the computer the entire time. So they will have a set schedule that we're giving them as a recommended way to follow it. That's also going to help you get your student out of bed in the morning and make sure that they're providing that set schedule to give them that routine, gives them that access. And so during, let's say, a set schedule for math, there will be some video lesson part of that, but then there's also going to be the opportunity to step away from the computer and step away and do the work in that format. Our humanities lessons, for example, will have obviously some instruction, some direct instruction time, but then there's going to be an opportunity for them to step away from the and be able to work on a writing assignment or a reading assignment, and really give the students that opportunity to explore their world as well. And so we have an opportunity now to really do some more project-based and some more student-specific learning and instruction with regards to that. So it's going to be a mix of both. So it is asynchronous instruction. We're providing a set schedule. We are recommending it. Students, we will be taking attendance daily, just like in school. But there are opportunities to do that asynchronously as well as is needed to meet the needs of the given families.
Is there a difference between in-person and online teaching in terms of the content?
In terms of the content, there is not a difference between in-person and online teaching. Our students throughout our 29 schools in the network have always had, in almost 100% harmony, we use the same curriculum throughout all of those schools. And whether they are at our Northeast campus in person or at our Northeast campus doing distance learning, those students will be receiving largely the same curriculum. It may not be exactly the same day to day, but it will be the same throughout that period of the grading period. And that's from a content perspective. There are some obvious differences between in-person instruction and distance learning instruction. But as far as the content goes and what students will cover, and the rigor at which we hold them and the support that we provide students, all of our students will receive those things at the same level.
And can you talk a little bit about how homework would be assigned and submitted for online learning?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that I haven't mentioned is that the platform that we will be using for our online learning is Microsoft Teams, and we do that also in conjunction with an in-house program called Sport, which helps our teachers collate the material and push it out to students in a manner that is seamless and user-friendly. But we utilize those platforms that are Microsoft-enabled platforms, and then they are also accessible on basically any device. We do recommend at least a tablet or a computer. A phone is not a good solution for that. If students need a tablet or a computer in order to access our online curriculum, we do have those available, and that'll be part of our back to school process in the coming weeks to make sure that all of our students who need it do have access to those materials. And then, Jen, I lost the train of the question. Can you remind me what that was?
Well, actually, before I get to that, can you answer whether there are specific requirements in terms of tech required for Microsoft Teams?
Yeah, there is not necessarily a specific thing. It needs to be enabled with a device that is relative. The last 4 or 5 years should suffice. It works just fine. It's accessible on a phone, but we would not recommend that. And if that is the only solution, please reach out to us so we can make sure we get you a device that helps your student be able to access the curriculum at the highest level we can. For our grade 5 students as well, all of them are already issued a tablet as part of our normal learning program.
Are Apple products sufficient?
Apple products are absolutely sufficient, yes. And many of our faculty and staff use those, as well as many of our students, and they do integrate seamlessly.
Okay, thank you. And the original question was how to submit homework. How will they submit online?
Yeah, regular checks for understanding are going to be a really important part of the distance learning program, and whether it is homework or a do now or an exit ticket as part of that online program, that will be submitted through Microsoft Teams. Depending on the assignment, the recommendation is often going to be, hey, can you try and make sure you get this done by tomorrow? There won't be a penalty for families or students that aren't able to get that done until the next day or the day after or something like that. We know that everyone's schedule is different. We know that life is going to be a little uncertain, and there may not be that help to make sure that there's that structure for your student to get things done. But generally speaking, it will be submitted through Microsoft Teams, and then the teachers will be taking that and giving feedback to all of your students on all of those assignments. And so pointing out to students, hey, I loved what you did here. This was a great piece of that. And then also giving feedback on, hey, why don't you take a look at this piece? There was a little bit of a mistake. That might be something that you come to student hours with later in the week during one of our live sessions. And let's get some clarification on that. So detailed feedback on all submitted assignments are super important, which is why that recommended due date is oftentimes going to be the next day, but there won't be penalty for late work in that aspect if it's a couple of days after that. We just want to give timely feedback.
Great. Will there be any meet the teacher, see your classroom type events before the start of the school year?
Yeah, so there definitely will be meet the teacher, see your classroom events prior to the school year. As I mentioned with the eBOS, we want our students to be exposed to that. So as I said, all of our teachers are going to be doing virtual introductions, and then there will be an opportunity during, we currently have it scheduled for August 12th and 13th, although that very much is subject to change. but we have scheduled an opportunity for welcome week, open house. The terminology is a little bit different depending on who you talk to. That's a chance for the students often to come in, and typically it's a chance for everyone to come into the building, see each other, go to their lockers and everything like that. We are almost certainly going to be doing that as kind of a drive in. Our teachers will be available for them to maintain some social distancing, but for you to be able to meet them and see them. Pick up student schedules, pick up our welcome bags, which have a backpack and a water bottle. And then also for those of you who ordered EduKits, make sure you have that then. We'll be giving you your Microsoft Teams login information. Every student has that login information, even if they're going to be learning in person, so that if we do need to pivot to 100% online, all students will have access to that. They get their CJ, and any students who may need access to a device will get that at that time as well. So it'll be an opportunity. Not a chance really to go inside the building because we don't want 700 people in one confined space at one time and wandering within very close proximity to each other if we can avoid that. And that is something where we'll use our large outdoor space and our large parking lot and still give the opportunity for that meet the teacher event.
Will the distance learning option be for the full year or only a portion of the year, and will families have the choice?
So families do have the choice to choose between distance learning and in-person. A survey will go out 2 weeks before we intend to start in-person learning, which our first day of school is August 17th. So 2 weeks before, parents need to choose between in-person or distance learning. We will send a survey to them asking which one they will be doing. It's 2 weeks in advance because that gives us time to make sure that we have everything set up from a technical perspective and also from a classroom perspective to prepare for all of those students. So you make that choice to start the beginning of the school year. If you elect for distance learning at that time, that is a decision that you're making for the entire grading period. And our grading periods are about 8 weeks long. Prior to the start of the next grading period, which is going to be in October, you will receive the opportunity to once again say what is your choice for the upcoming grading period. And so this gives you flexibility as conditions ebb and flow with the pandemic to make that decision. And so you get to choose each grading period whether you want in-person or distance learning, and that's as long as both options are available to us. For those of you who choose in-person learning, if for some reason during the grading period you need to switch to distance learning, that can be done at any time during that period because we know it may happen that some families, for a variety of reasons, may need to choose to switch from distance learning, from in-person learning to distance learning.
Is there a reason that it's better for students to only come back at the grading period? In other words, why can't we switch back and forth all the time?
Yeah, so one piece of it is we need to make sure that our classrooms are set up. And so having it switch from a day-to-day between there's 8 kids here one day and 30 kids here the next doesn't allow us to prepare for proper social distancing and everything like that. The other part is the in-person schooling routines are a really big part of that, and practicing those and reteaching a routine to students every 3 days, every 4 days can be very difficult for the students as well, where they aren't able to establish those routines and feel comfortable in the school. The other aspect of that is also just a logistical piece of, although they'll be learning the same curriculum, whether they're distance learning or in person, they won't necessarily be in exactly the same place from a day to day, and we don't want to create gaps for students who are experiencing that transition.
Great. Let's go to class sizes or max for class sizes.
So there is not necessarily a max for class sizes. That will be in large part dictated by how many students opt for at home and how many students opt for in person. We are committed to keeping them small where we can and keeping students socially distanced within each other. So we want to make sure that we are spread out. And so Ursula and her team of Chris, Crystal, David, Ursula, and Samira have done an amazing job of getting things in that first stage of being set up. We intentionally have planned out our classrooms to make sure that there is as much opportunity to spread out throughout those classrooms and still self-contain them. And I'm sure that's going to be a question Jen's going to ask me in a minute, what that looks like. but there is that opportunity to make sure that they are spread out within the classrooms. And so we're looking at what those classrooms look like from that standpoint as well. So there's not necessarily aside from our normal hard cap of students on it, there's not necessarily a hard cap, but we are anticipating being able to keep the class sizes to a size that allows for as much social distancing as we can.
And actually, I'd like to switch back what the campus setup would look like should we return to campus, because we have a few questions about how do we make sure we don't have contamination if the kids are traveling all over the building? What are we going to do about supplies? Can you talk a little bit about traffic flow, for example? And by traffic, I don't actually mean the traffic in the parking lot, but the traffic in the building, entrance, exits, and so forth. Ursula, are you there?
I am here, but part of your question cut out a little bit. Do you mind repeating?
Sorry, did you ask for me to repeat my question?
Yes, please. Part of your question cut out.
Okay, let's start with what are we doing in the building? Cross-contaminating in terms of supplies. So the shared individual supplies. And the other question was about travel in the building and how we can keep kids socially distanced.
Sure. So still had a little bit of trouble hearing that question, but I'm going to do my best to answer as best as possible. So we do have a couple of measures put in place to make sure that everyone is as socially distanced as possible. For example, we'll have the operations team will have signs placed outside of restrooms, for example, to make sure that only a certain number of occupants enter the restroom. We'll have certain measures put in place as far as cleaning goes. I have a checklist to make sure that we clean restrooms after each use, and we'll also implement certain procedures to make sure that we clean classrooms as well after each use or after students exit the classroom. As far as travel within the building, I will have signs placed at certain points in the building to make sure that children stay as spread apart as possible and that they don't congregate in one general area to make sure that we don't have that cross-contamination, make sure that everyone stays as far distance as possible. So if I heard that question correctly, we will have, I have a checklist, a cleaning schedule, making sure that we have appropriate signage to maintain that social distance, making sure that we disinfect. I've purchased a electrostatic sprayer and that I'll be using as well to make sure that I do as deep a clean as possible to ensure that there are no transference of any kind of contamination.
Great, thank you. And in terms of visitors to the building, will you have protocols?
Yes, there is protocol for visitors. There are always protocol that we implement for visitors, but especially now we will have certain protocols. For example, our front lobby will make sure that only a certain number of visitors are allowed in that front lobby at a time. There's going to be signage there to maintain distance at the front lobby, as well as a disinfectant or disinfecting schedule at the front lobby as well. We will have contactless temperature thermometers as well that we will check to make sure that our visitors that we are able to allow into the building are temperature, they have a reasonable temperature, and they will also have an attestation that they sign as well, just making sure that we are on the same page with them not exhibiting any COVID-related symptoms and not having traveled anywhere outside of a particular region.
Great. And will students and staff be screened as well?
Yes, students and staff follow nearly about the same procedures. They have a few more checkpoints. We'll be temperature checking them. They will also have an attestation. They'll also sign in at the front office. We have various signages around the building as well to make sure that our faculty and staff are disinfecting their areas, making sure that they are not we have appropriate occupancy in different areas of the building. So we have quite a few checkpoints for faculty and staff, including wearing masks where they're not able to socially distance and wearing gloves when they need to.
Great, thank you. I'm going to give you another break because I know that your internet is struggling over there. Chris, can you follow up with a couple things about, because I don't know if she covered this in the beginning, in terms of student movement, if they'll generally be staying in place and what that looks like with the schedule, and also that there's the mask question.
Yeah, so we went back to the drawing board with our schedule. Normally our students do transition from a humanities classroom to a math classroom, and then into a different classroom for something like connections, et cetera. And so what we did was we went back and we looked at it, and we want our students to access that same curriculum, but we looked really hard at student movement and ways that we could reduce the number of students that are using any given classroom. And so what we have wound up doing is that all of our elements, our student groupings, our classes, are assigned a specific classroom that is their classroom. So there is a classroom for one cesium, there is a classroom for our third grade class, and they are assigned to that for their math class and their humanities class and their read class. And that is for all of our class sections, K through 5. They have a classroom where the vast majority of their classes will take place, including lunch, to make sure that there is as little movement of students using the same space. So that small grouping was definitely one of the CDC recommendations that we were able to put into place very quickly. There will be a little bit of movement. There are certain classes such as PE that are just not conducive to be able to be held within a classroom that is set up with tables and chairs in it. And so there will be some movement for things like PE where they're using our exercise room or outdoor spaces. There will also be movement during the school day for recesses because we want our students to have recess. That is K through 5. We want them to have that opportunity for that social interaction. And so there is movement going to and from those recesses. But that movement is limited, and it's also coordinated so that there won't be groups of students crossing each other in the hallway and things like that. Anytime that they are leaving or entering the room, students will be sanitizing their hands, whether that's with hand sanitizer or washing their hands with soap and water, which is something that we will be practicing at school, just as you've been practicing at home. They will do that anytime they leave and anytime they enter the classroom from a different location. We're also going to be working with the students, as Ursula mentioned, on sanitizing and working them on cleaning up their spaces. It's a good habit to help them learn that when you get done using a space, you clean up after yourselves. And they're able to do that in a manner that is age appropriate, of course, with regards to that. And then you said the other part of that question was masks. So masks, we are following the CDC guidelines as well as any TEA mandates that come out, as well as local health officials. So all of those will be followed, and those have been somewhat changing, but any mandates specific to what that age is. But we are recommending masks for all of our students when they aren't able to socially distance. We're requiring masks for all of our staff and faculty when they aren't able to socially distance as well. And those biggest times when they're not going to be able to socially distance is in particular those times when they're in those passing periods, when they're going out to recess. Those lines, it's going to be nearly impossible to keep them 6 feet apart, but we can wear the mask during those times and therefore mitigate as much as we can. But if we're able to socially distance in a classroom, for example, then the mask is not something that would need to be worn during those times, although students are, as always, welcome and encouraged to if they want to.
And you touched on supplies a little bit, community versus individual, but let's build on that a little bit because we have 2 questions about EduKits and when they would be coming and if they would be mailed out.
Yeah, so depending on when you ordered your EduKit, so there's 2 parts to the EduKit supplies. And depending on when you ordered it, that is either shipped directly to the school for your individual student supplies, or that is shipped to your house. And so if you order a little later, your individual supplies are shipped directly to your house as part of that EduKit supplies. And then there's also the community supplies, and all of those are shipped directly to the school. And so some of it, as Ursula touched on with community supplies, a large number of our community supplies are things like scissors and rulers and crayons for the younger grades. All of those community supplies are things that we are adding to students or not, so that when we give them a glue stick to use, they will be using that glue stick in a little container that we've got for them. They'll be using those community supplies that are normally just a bin of glue sticks. They'll have their own individual bin of those community supplies so that they aren't sharing those supplies. All of the EduKits are set to arrive. The last day to order was actually yesterday, and then the company is committed to us that they will have those here to us during the first week is when we get them in at our school, and then the EduKits will be able to be picked up during that schedule pickup opportunity, along with the welcome. All of that will be available to you to make sure that your student has all the supplies, because whether they are at home or distance learning, students do need those same school supplies. It allows us to build those same routines with them, that this green folder, that is your homework folder. We want to make sure that you get in the habit of, when you finish your homework, put it in the green folder so that you have it in, and that you have, you know, a binder that is specific to Science 4, or you have a notebook that is specific to this class. And so those school supplies will be the same whether you are learning at home or whether you're learning in school. It's just a matter of how they're allocated and when you're using them.
And are backpacks allowed?
So backpacks are normally something that is not allowed in the classrooms. There are a lot of reasons for that. One of the biggest of which is that our teachers tend, myself especially, tends to trip over them as we're walking around the room checking on students. So they are typically not allowed. In large part, that won't actually change too much, but there will be times of the day when the backpacks will be needed to be in the classroom in order to ensure a safe and orderly both entry and exit from the school without having 100 kids at their lockers at the same time. We don't want that. So there will be times during the day when the kids will have backpacks, but for the most part, backpacks won't be needed in the classroom.
If you are not able to attend the regularly scheduled live class, if you're doing distance learning, can you work around it? Will there be a penalty if they can't be live?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. While we do want to provide that regular schedule for students because it provides us more opportunity for live interaction, there are absolutely going to be times, a teacher is a perfect example, may have their own children where they're not able to support them during that time because they are in the middle of their workday and teaching, and may not be able to support both of their kids at the same time with something that may be going on. And so there will be asynchronous opportunity to view those and to work on it, and there is no penalty for that. Our learning is asynchronous learning. We are just really asynchronous, meaning live is not, the lessons are not taught live, but our support for the students is offered in a live session. And we want to make sure that our students have those live opportunities for support on a daily basis with somebody, so that they have that. A 6-year-old trying to email and get their questions, not a conducive format for them to be able to get the help and support that they need. It's also not a way for them to get that human interaction. And that is the other piece with our online puzzle that is going to look a little bit different than it did last year, is our students will have video and voice enabled on their Microsoft Teams account for them to be able to have that interaction both with their teacher and with other students in their class.
And will specials classes be included in distance learning?
Yes, we are a full liberal arts curriculum, whether you are in person or online. And those specials classes are a hugely important part of our curriculum. Typically for our younger students, they have that class for 85 minutes a week. Our anticipation is that our students who are distance learning would have the ability to classes, maybe not quite to that same minutes threshold, but they will have that opportunity to work largely project-based assignments for about that time period, an opportunity to really indulge in the whole person. We know that was something a lot of our students enjoyed because that is a little bit of a different mental break during the school day for our students to make sure that they are engaging in that. They will also have the opportunity for live check-ins with the teachers to show the progress on their art assignment and to share out their video. But it won't be overly time intensive, but it would be somewhat commensurate to what they normally see.
And I guess that actually leads to this question about, do you have an idea of how many hours a day they would be online?
Yeah, so when we're talking about how many hours a day they would be online, I want to make clear that them being online, or the online students, how many hours a day are they spending on school, is not the same as how many hours a day are they spending in front of a device. So our students who are doing distance learning will have a school day that has about the same number of core minutes. They won't have recesses as part of their mandatory schedule. You as parents can build in recesses as part of that break. They will have time when they're not scheduled. Use that for a recess, use that to have the kid take a mental break, use that for the purposes you wish. But it's not strictly in front of a device. And so when we're referring to the amount of time that they'll be there, it depends a little bit on the grade level. For the younger students, the total time that they'll be engaged in school activities will probably be about 4 hours. For our slightly older students, the total time that they're engaged in school activities is going to grow a little bit, but that is the total time involved in all school activities. So that's both the in front of a device, getting those asynchronous lessons, the being in front of a device, getting live interaction and live help, and also that significant chunk of time that is away from the device, working on assignments, working on that checking for understanding. And that piece of that is able to be done away from in almost every instance. So about half of their time, I would say, is going to be in front of a device, and about half the time is going to be working away from the device on those activities, a little bit more of a self-paced opportunity. And those, just for student support, will need to be in front of the device because we want to help students.
And this is an easy question. If we do choose in-person learning, what time does the school day start and end?
Oh, that is an easy question. I like easy ones. So it's not as easy though. So our school day begins at 7:40 for kinder through 3. That is when the first class actually begins. So our teachers will actually be instructing at 7:40 in 1 second. So we do ask all of those students to arrive on campus by about 7:30. And then our grade 4 and 5 students have their first class begin at 8:05. So again, we ask all of those students to be there about 10 minutes early to make sure that our class time is able to be preserved. The school day ends at 3 o'clock for kindergarten. It ends at 3:25 for grades 1 through 3. And for grades 4 and 5, it ends at 3:45. We do have before care available for all of our students. It is not fee-based, it is 100% free. That begins at 7 o'clock. And that before care program for grades K through 3, those students will actually be going directly to their element rooms to be with their KETs and their LETs during that morning time, that from 7, if they get there that early, until our first class begins at 7:40. That also would be an opportunity for them to access their LET and their KET for student hours if they choose.
Just a few more questions on our list. Would online learning ever require the students to report to campus?
The students themselves, not necessarily. That may change depending on where TEA goes with state testing and how that would be done. We don't have an answer to that yet, but largely speaking, no, they would not be required to be on campus. The exception that is made by getting their schedule and supplies, and if they need a device. But even in that case, the student doesn't need to come by. The parent can come by, and that can be a contact-free process as well. We were able to do that with say hi through the window, parents pop the trunk, we put in whatever needs to be put in, and have some face-to-face time. Do that contact as well.
Someone asked about transferring a BASIS location. If you've only done distance learning, would you still be able to transfer?
Yeah, so we know there are a number of students who are distance learning, and they've made the decision they're going to be doing online learning for the entire year, and that's just where they're at right now. And there are a number who've done that, and they may live on the far west side of town, and so when they're done with distance learning with our Northeast campus, we have gotten a couple questions about can they transfer to another school. At the end of the school year, students are allowed to transfer between BASIS campuses, and they do receive a priority level on our lottery process when that happens. If you are looking to transfer for the coming school year during our open enrollment period during October and November, that is when you'd want to make sure you fill out your application for whatever that school of preference might be, whether it is a Chavano campus or a Med Center campus. But I am 100% convinced that your educational experience at Northeast will be to a level where you're not going to want to transfer. And I mean that wholeheartedly, that it's going to be worth the drive for you, even if you're on the west side of town, to be able to come to our campus.
Agreed. The last thing we'll talk about are what will happen if there's a confirmed case on campus.
Yeah, so per local and state health regulations, if there is a confirmed positive case on campus, all students, parents, and staff and faculty as well that are in person at our campus will receive notice that there is a person at the campus who has a confirmed positive test, and that's that's per state and local health guidelines. And then as far as would the school need to close or something like that, no, we would not need to. And again, that's based on current guidelines and mandates. What we would do is the room that student frequented or any other rooms that they frequented, we would shut those down for rooms and make sure that they are completely sanitized. And so in that instance, that grade level section may be put into a different classroom for a period of days. We do have the space at Northeast because we are intentionally starting as a smaller school. So we actually have some extra space at our classroom but we will sanitize those rooms and do that. Anybody who has been defined based on what the CDC defines as contact within somebody would be notified of that as well. But those being in the same classroom as a student who tests positive or being in the same classroom as a teacher who may do it is not the same thing as contact. But if there was what is defined as contact, we would let those specific individuals know that as well. But that is where social distancing and the masks and the hand sanitizing all comes in to mitigate that.
And obviously the confirmed case would no
after they have been symptom-free without medication for 72 hours, as 10 days since those symptoms began. And then a negative test as well is something that would override that. But after 70 hours without and 10 days since the symptoms began, they would not need a negative test to return. And again, the big part of that is being the symptom-free. During that time, if it was a student, the parents would have the option of using our homework buddy program to keep the student up to date with what we are doing within the classroom and staying up to date with the homework and everything like that. And then coming back in person at the conclusion of that 10-day period, or they could elect to immediately transition at that point in time to our distance learning program for the remainder of the grading period.
Great, and looks like we got through all of those questions just in the nick of time. So if you have any closing remarks before we conclude.
Yeah, one thing I do want to add, just in touch with that, is I know during a number of our sessions, people ask, well, what about the teachers? How are we protecting them with that? That's also something where we want to make sure that they have those same things in place to be able to support them. So one of the things that we as a network have been able to do to make sure that we're protecting our teachers with time off if they need to take it due to a COVID related thing is we have added a significant number of days, 13 in fact, that is days off that would be available to our teachers if for a COVID related reason they do need to miss time from school. We know it's an uncertain time and we want to provide support for our staff in that endeavor as well. So I do want to thank you all for joining us today. We will be hosting another one of these next week. I also have an information session tonight at 6 o'clock, where I'm sure I will be answering a lot of these questions as well, but that information session is going to talk about our curriculum in quite a bit of detail. I want to thank you for joining us. I am here to answer the questions you have. Please know that we are committed to the educational success of your student, whether they're distance learning or in person, but most importantly, we are committed to the safety of your student. We're committed to the emotional well-being of your student, and we are committed to the support of your student, whether they're distance learning or online. So I do want to thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out as well. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You can get back to work.
Yes, thank you, Ursula.
Thank you.